Okay, so today I'm going to demonstrate how to draw an otter. So here I have this cute little picture of one kind of standing up, looking all adorable. So the first thing I would suggest doing is start with the body shape. We have a really long kind of teardroppy oval. So I'm just going to first start off with sketching a really long oval shape. Don't worry if it's not perfect, we're going to come back and change this. So all I'm doing is I'm just drawing kind of like two somewhat diagonal lines and then adding a smile at the bottom with a smaller smile at the top. Key thing, make sure this is wider than it is up here. Once you're pretty satisfied with the width and the length, if you want a chubbier one, make it wider. If you want a taller one, make it longer. Once you're satisfied with the length that you have, then you're going to draw the head. So here, if I look at it, it looks like the head is kind of like a round shape, and then it also has a round muzzle. It's a little bit flatter on the top. So whenever I go to draw this, I'm going to start with kind of like a circle that's kind of a little bit flat-ish on the top. Don't make it too rounded, but you don't want to make it totally flat. So just make sure that it's not like a pointy circle or anything, okay? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the muzzle. So now also, before you move on, make sure the head's not too big. I can fit 1, 2, 3, about 3.5, 3/4, 1, 2, I need to make my head a little smaller. So always a really good idea to kind of measure first. That way you don't end up having something too big or too small. So I'm going to make my head just a little bit smaller so it's not too big. All right, so here if I take that 1, 2, 3.5-ish. So that's a good size for the size of the body. So now that I have that done, now I can move on to the muzzle. The muzzle is a very round shape and it kind of sticks out a little bit. So I'm going to go about maybe like a third down from the top, and that's where I'm going to start drawing my muzzle. Like this, I'm going to overlap it slightly and then draw it very, very lightly. To pick up where we left off, we just had the muzzle. Now, let's kind of focus on just the face for a little bit, and then we're going to go down to the body. So if I kind of zoom in just a little bit here so we can see this closer. All right, so what I would first do is I'd first kind of like lighten up some of these extra shapes on the inside since we already have the rest of this kind of mapped out. So now that I have those lightened up, I can see that I have this kind of like forehead dip right here. So check and make sure that you have it in an accurate size. So here mine's going down a little bit too far, so I'm going to make my muzzle a little bit taller. Kind of just check and see if you are satisfied with yours. No need to change. It's kind of up to you. So here I have the top of the forehead's fairly smooth, and then we have that little dip for the brow. The muzzle kind of sticks out a little bit, and if you'll notice, we have kind of like this little frowny face for the mouth, and then it kind of has a little curve right here on the corner. So it's almost like we're doing like a little cat mouth, but it's not quite that rounded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here on the edge, and then I'm just going to do a very small smile that goes up, and then it's going to be kind of almost the opposite side of where that little line is for the brow, and then we're just going to drop it down and do a little bit of a smile, a little otter smile, making it look kind of cute. And then once I have that part done, then I can just drop down the little muzzle area right here, and then just keep the jawline on this side. So once I'm pretty satisfied with the size of the muzzle, then I can go back in and add the nose. Now the nose is kind of almost dog-like, but it's a little bit more rounded. So I'm just going to start with a little frown, really close to the edge of the muzzle. And then I'm just going to drop it down into a smile, like this. And then if you want to have an extra detail, you can see how their nostrils are bumped up. So if you want to add a little bump up for their nostrils, you can. If you choose to, it's up to you. Not 100% necessary, but if you want to, you can. That adds a nice, cute little detail. All right, so feel free to tweak things as you're going. If you feel like things are sticking out too far, if they don't stick out far enough, erase, change things up. But now what I see that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the eyes. If I look, the eyes are kind of like on the same level here. They're a slight diagonal. So if I very lightly draw a slight diagonal, and then especially if I continue it to the other side of the head, so I'm just going to change it to a slight curve. This will also tell me where my ears are going to go here in a second. So what I'm going to do before I move on is I'm going to go ahead and do this muzzle. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit into the head, and I'm just going to curve that to make the eye on the other side. So the eye is mostly hidden. You can just barely see it. So that's why I'm choosing to do it in that way. And then it's got a little tuft of fur above his brow, so I'm just going to add a little bump right there to indicate that. All right, so now I see the other eye is very small and very round, and it's kind of a slight diagonal from the nose, and it stays on that eye line. So slight diagonal from the nose, and that's going to tell me that this right here is about where I want to have my eye. So if I look in and compare it to the mouth, if I go up from the mouth, it's also a little bit to the side of the mouth as well. So for the eye shape, it's very round, so I'm basically going to be drawing a circle, but I'm going to make it a slight frown, like this on the top, and then a slight smile on the bottom. So I still have some slightly pointy edges to the eye, but overall it's basically a circle. And then I can add a little white highlight and then fill in the rest of it. Alright, so now that I have his face pretty much done, I can go ahead and do his ear. It's very, very close to the outside of the head, and it's just very, very round, and we have kind of like just two little frowny faces that we're going to do. So right here, across from the eye, near the back of the head, if this right here is the back of the head, if it helps, if you'll notice, see how the back of the head goes down and then touches the shoulder, so we have this like chunk. If it helps, go ahead and draw that chunk that goes down to the shoulder first, and then you can add the little smile that makes the ear shape. And I was just drawing like a double smile, so the shade in the inside, so you can tell the difference between the inner ear and the outer ear. Once you're done with that, you can erase any extra lines that you don't need. And then later I'm going to come back and add some of those distinctive markings on its face. Something you can add is a little detail that if you're going for cartoon style, it's not necessary, but if you want to, you can. You can add like little dots on his face and add little whiskers and stuff coming out from there, because I think that makes it look a little bit cuter. Alright, so now that I have the face pretty much done, I'm going to move on down to the body. So for the body, something that I'm going to focus on first is going to be like the arms and legs. So here I can see that the arms, their shoulders, you can see this little mass right here. This kind of is like their shoulder area, and then they have their elbows dropping down for their hands. This right here, you can kind of see the other side of the shoulder area right here. So what I'm going to first start off with is I'm going to draw something, keeping a distance between the neck and the body. I'm going to keep a neck area, and I'm going to draw really exaggerated shoulders. They're really long ovals here, and I'm going to make this one bump out just a tiny bit as I draw this shoulder right here. Now notice that this one's a little bit bigger because it's kind of turned towards me, so that's why that's a little bit bigger than this one. And then once I have my shoulder sketched out, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this down. So if this is the shoulder, this will be the elbow right here. Then I'm then going to do a slight diagonal line. And then for the paws for now, I'm just going to cap them off with a nub and then bring it back in like this. Alright, so now that I have this arm sketched out, I can go and sketch out this one. If I notice it's a little bit higher up than the other one, and I don't really see the elbow very much, it's just kind of sort of like the nub coming down. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a little frown. I'm just going to bring it back up to the body for now. Alright, now that I have that kind of loosely sketched in, then I can go back through and I can get rid of some of these extra lines. I don't need this one right here, and I don't really need the inside piece here. And then what I would suggest doing, erase the top half of this oval, but keep that bottom half right here. That way whenever you go to add the shading or color or texture or anything, you can kind of see where you need to have a slightly darker area where the torso is going to be slightly bent. And then also make sure that this did create a little bit of a bump out. And then double check and make sure that your neck is fully connected to the head area. So this right here is what I see. I see that a little bit of the floof on the torso is kind of sticking in a little bit right here. So I'm going to add a small increase there just to make it look a little bit more detailed. Alright, so now for the feet, something that I would see that I would suggest doing is we have 1, 2, 3, 4 toes. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 toes over here. So on this one, it's kind of pointing down. So what I would do is I'd first kind of like sketch out the direction that you want your toes to go. So I'm just going to do like little finger toes first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cap it off with little smiles. They go back up to the corner. And then I notice that this one has a gap, but these two, or these three are all touching. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the first one first. And I'm just going to draw little frowns that are all connected together. Alright, so now that I have them all connected, I can use my eraser and clean up the edges. And then you can keep it smooth if you want to. If you want to add like little claws, they do have like little claws. You can just add like little triangles to the tips of their fingers if you want to. That's just an extra detail. And then something that I do see that I need to fix is this does have a little bit of a wrist. So I'm going to bring this up just a tiny bit. And then I'm going to bring it back down for kind of the fluff. So all I'm doing for the fluff is I'm just adding a Z-line texture. So that Z-line is just kind of like you're drawing spikes and you're kind of slightly tilting them a little bit. So I'm just drawing really tiny Z-lines because they have very short fur, but it is still there. I'm also adding a little bit around the torso, a little bit down here, and just some in some areas. And of course, if you don't want to add that extra detail because you want to keep it more cartoony, definitely feel free to do that. And then on here, because the fingers are kind of like pointing towards us, it's going to create a nub effect. So fingers are usually like long and skinny. If you face towards you, it's going to become more of a nub. So right here, instead of drawing long ovals, I'm just going to erase the tip of the nub, and then I'm just going to add one almost partially connected circle. There's a 2. Then I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap because its fingers are a little bit splayed. 3. Then I'm going to add one more off to the side, 4. So it's almost like you're drawing like a cat foot to where you have the little toes kind of separated out. I'm just going to make it a little bit skinnier for the wrist and then bring it back up. There's a little bit of that fur texture, so I can just add a little bit of that texture going down. And that's kind of what the finger's doing because it's facing towards us instead of facing down. And of course, if you want to add little claws, you can add little claws to the tips of the nubs, and that can give you some more detail. Alright, so now that I have the upper torso done, I can go ahead and move on down to the lower torso. Here I see that we have this right here, that massive thing right there, that's the thigh. And then so is this right here, so they have really, really big, thick thighs. So I'm going to start off with sketching out this one. So it's kind of like right there below the elbow is where we're starting that thigh, and it goes all the way to the bottom of the body. Sticks out slightly. Same thing over here. What I would suggest doing right here is I would start kind of on the bottom of this thigh and then draw like a smile going up until it touches the foot, and then just have a bump coming out from there for that other thigh. Now, depending on if you drew that original teardrop shape well enough, you may not have to change that too much, but if you need to, you might have to bump it out just a little bit. All right, so then coming down from here, I'm just going to connect the back of its spine down to its hips just a little bit. All right, so now that I have that shape, then I can go ahead and draw my feet. So this one, the foot is slightly diagonal, so it starts on the body, makes a slight diagonal line. I'm going to do a flat line going out for the direction of the toes, and then do another diagonal line going back to connect to the body. I'll come back and do the details later. On this one, it's kind of facing a little bit more towards me, so I'm going to face it a little bit more down, and then draw a flat line, and come back like this, just to get it all together. Now, kind of similar to how we drew this foot, that's going to be how we draw these toes. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4 toes. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring it up like this in a partial circle. I'm just going to add 1, 2, 3, and the 4th toe like this. Feel free to add like the tops of the toes if you want to, so you can draw like those little frowns coming down. And then of course, if you want to add like the little claws, you can add like little claws. Same thing on this foot. I do see that I see a little bump up for the toe here, so I would just do a slight bump up for the toe, and then of course continuing that same process over and over until you get your 4 toes. Now sometimes, depending on the reference that you're using, you may not see all 4 toes, so really be patient and pay attention to that. Now I'm going to add that little indentation that I see right here. It looks like a little smiley face on the top of his foot, so I will add a little smile on the top of the foot right here. Alright, so to finish it up, I can erase a little bit on the inside of the body, like this, just on the tops. I do want to leave a little bit so that I can kind of tell whenever I go to do the shading part which direction to go. I would suggest adding a little bit of texture just to kind of break up that smoothness to make it look more like a fluffy otter. Oops, sorry, they're doing construction outside. Alright, last thing I would do is I would add a tail. We can kind of see the tail kind of blurry in the background. Just kind of goes off and like a little nub. And you can of course make that longer or shorter if you want to. It's entirely up to you. You can move it on the other side too if you want. And I'll just add a little bit of a fluffy tail. So this is just, it's like a big smile that changes into a frown. So we call it a wonky line. And then you just mimic the same thing. Just very important, leave a gap between where you started and stopped. That way it doesn't look too thin of a tail. Alright, so once you're satisfied with the overall drawing, then you can either choose to color or shade it. I am going to go through and add a little bit of shading. So I'm just going to hold my pencil like this. And then I'm just going to go through, especially with the distinctive markings, because I don't know if this is a particular type of otter. It could be. But some of these lines look like they're making pretty particular masks, so I'm just going to add a little shading for those masks. Of course, if you don't want to shade it, totally don't have to. It's entirely up to you. But especially with the feet, I like to shade the feet a little bit darker so that it makes them stand out a little more. It does look like these feet are a little bit darker than the other parts of the belly. That could just be the lighting. And then, of course, using shadow to help make the features stand out more. So, like, anywhere that I have a wrinkle or anywhere that there is a piece of the body that's, like, overlapping another, adding a little bit of shading really helps sell the fact that this is a creature that is in a 3D environment and not just flat. That makes it just a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to make these paws down here really dark, like this. Add a little bit of shading back here on the tail so that we know it's back in the back. And I think that looks pretty cute. So of course you can add more details. You can add more like fluff and fur, anything else that you want. But I'm pretty satisfied with that. I think it looks really adorable. Definitely feel free to draw them in different poses. These are like noodle boys, so they can be bent and turned into any kind of like direction that you want to. They're really fun to watch. If you've never seen a otter playing, they're really adorable and very cute. All right. Well, I hope you had fun, and if you need any help, just feel free to ask. Thanks. Bye.